This is Democracy Watch. Marc, we've now got the potential for a cataclysmic October surprise. So there's a big case in Mississippi that will consider blocking mail-in votes that were postmarked before Election Day but arrive after Election Day, and it would block them from being counted. So the case is right now in the Fifth Circuit, but it's in front of a three-judge panel, and all three judges are Trump appointees. So what are the implications of this case here?
So this is a very, very important case. The fact that it's from Mississippi should not lead people to believe that this is not a case that could affect voters virtually everywhere. And as you point out, 18 states plus the District of Columbia allow for mail-in ballots that have been sent prior to Election Day, but are received due to, slow mail or whatever, a day or two after the election. Allow them to be counted because they were in fact mailed before Election Day, and the voter voted and did everything right, and their vote should count. And so that is nearly half the states have that rule. One of those states is actually Mississippi. And the Republican Party and its allies have launched a multi-year effort to try to get these ballots not to count. And they have done it through a variety of litigation means. They have filed lawsuits not just in Mississippi, but in Illinois, in Nevada, in other states as well, trying to get a court to bite on a very extreme legal theory. And they filed one of those lawsuits in Mississippi, and that has now gone to they lost at the trial court before a very conservative judge, a judge that happened to be appointed by former President Trump. And now it is, as you said, has been argued before the Fifth Circuit. If they were to prevail, it could have very, very large consequences. In the first instance, it would have large consequences in Mississippi. But everyone believes that their goal is not to stop at Mississippi in the Fifth Circuit, but to get this to the United States Supreme Court and try to make this change nationally.
So if the Trump panel does rule in Donald Trump's favor and does block mail-in ballots that arrive after Election Day from being counted, what would happen next? Would we see an immediate appeal to the Supreme Court, or would that have a downside, knowing that if you appeal to the Supreme Court and they uphold it, then it becomes a national precedent as opposed to just precedent in that specific circuit?
So look, one of the oddities of this case has been the procedural posture, because first of all, you could ask yourself, why is the RNC suing Mississippi, right? It's not exactly a swing state. Yeah. The state of Mississippi then, after it got the lawsuit, the legislature started to repeal the law and said, oh, wait, if the Republican Party, if the National Republican Committee doesn't want these ballots to count, we will change the law so they don't count.
And they're like, no, we want the law because we want the lawsuit.
Correct. That's what happened next. And so the concern is, now my law firm, we represent parties that have intervened to defend the law. But part of the concern is that Mississippi is still defending the law as well. And so the question of whether it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court is not just in the hands of my firm and my clients if the RNC loses, but also in the hands of Mississippi. And the question is whether if the RNC loses, it goes to the Supreme Court. If Mississippi loses, or the RNC wins, whether, we would have to make a decision whether to go to the Supreme Court, but so would the state of Mississippi.
Marc, it sounds like Republicans can kind of have their cake and eat it too, in the sense that if the RNC loses this case, then they can just appeal it up to the Supreme Court. And if Mississippi loses this case, then they, as Republicans in Mississippi, can also appeal it to the Supreme Court. So don't they kind of win both ways here, because they're kind of fighting against each other, both knowing that the end result here, the goal of all of this is just to get this thing in front of the Supreme Court so that we could have a national standard, a national precedent where mail ballots aren't counted after Election Day?
Yeah, look, and that is definitely a concern, right? I mean, it is a concern that the RNC chose to bring this lawsuit in Mississippi. They slowed down other cases that might have moved faster because they wanted this case to move first. That when Mississippi looked accommodating and willing to change its law, that halted. So it certainly looks like you suggest that, there may be the ability of there being at least elected Republicans on both sides of this. It's one of the reasons why we intervened. My law firm and I intervened in this case to try to prevent this. But look, this is, I think the other thing is we need to realize this is part of a national effort. This is not just on this issue of late received ballots. We know that Donald Trump has said that he does not believe any ballots should be counted after Election Day, whether they are received before Election Day or not. Remember the stop the count nonsense?
Yeah.
So this lawsuit is about this one piece of stopping the count. But it is only, I believe, the first piece of what Donald Trump wants, which is something that would have much, much more dire consequences.
Marc, you'd mentioned that your law firm is intervening in this case. I think that what that does is kind of underscore the importance that you and your team have in this pre-election period litigation and what I'm sure will be post-election litigation. So for all of us watching on the outside, one small step that we can all take to support the work that Marc and his team are doing is signing up for Democracy Docket. It's the news outlet he founded to focus on everything voting in elections. It's an amazing resource. I use it on a daily basis. So I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Marc, is it possible that, let's say Republicans are successful with this, that Louis DeJoy's USPS could perhaps slow mail from certain jurisdictions, like, for example, major blue cities, knowing that even though ballots might have been sent on time, postmarked on time, that so long as they arrive after Election Day, that they just simply won't be counted?
Look, I think regardless of this ruling, people have to look really closely at what the U.S. Postal Service has been doing to mail service. I mean, we have seen already some major policies out of DeJoy that he has spearheaded that have the effect of dramatically slowing mail service. And you're right, it doesn't slow it on a, shall we say, equal basis across the country. Some of these have drawn a lot of congressional scrutiny. Some of these have drawn the ire of people who just, who want to make sure their constituents are represented properly. And that's before this lawsuit. I mean, that is like literally, we're talking about closing sorting facilities and the like leading up to this election. Louis DeJoy has been at the center of controversy around the restrictions on postal service activity that have negative consequences on voting by mail for 4 years now. And I'm not accusing him of doing it, but if one were to want to do it, they would do a lot of the same things that he seems to be doing.
Why do you presume that Trump appointed Louis DeJoy is still in a position where he could in any way have an impact on the election results like this? Like, I know people watching this are completely perplexed by the fact that he's still in that position.
Yeah. So look, I can't answer the question as to how, decisions are made about who is the postmaster general or when they're removed or not removed. Yeah. What I can say is this, is that, people who are going to vote by mail should vote by mail. People who want to vote in person vote in person. If you are one of these people who wants to vote by mail, my strong advice to you is return your ballot soon. Like, do not wait until the last week. I think the Postal Service is saying to give them 2 weeks or 10 days in order to get your ballot back. And let's be honest, that when the first time I heard that time frame, that seemed like a very slow mail delivery time period. But it's clearly the case that the mail service is not going to be fast. So if you have access to a drop box, use a drop box. If you can deliver your mail ballot in person, deliver it in person. And if you're going to vote by mail, just, put it in that mailbox more than 2 weeks in advance. Make sure you get it back in time. And let's not let this be an issue for your ballot come this November.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we're clear that there is no risk in voting for mail, but the important point here, and I'll be voting for mail. I don't know if you're going to be voting for mail.
Probably, yeah.
So, but the point here that I think is a really important one is to vote by mail as early as possible. So as soon as you get your ballots, and this will help for two reasons. One, it will eliminate any potential issue in terms of a vote being counted because of slow mail service. But also, once the campaigns, for example, know that you've cast your ballot, they're not going to be targeting you anymore. They're not going to be spending any more of their limited resources and money to make sure that you get out to vote. They can channel that money toward people who actually do need, who are potentially undecided voters, who may not be going out to the polls. So if you know that you're a definite voter, get your mail ballot out as soon as humanly possible and let the campaigns focus on other people who are not as sure things as you might be.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize that second point enough. One of the reasons why Republican operatives have been pleading with Donald Trump to stop attacking early voting, stop attacking mail-in voting, right, which is really a form of early voting, is exactly this, which is that when people vote early, then the campaigns know, okay, that person has voted, so I don't need to knock on their door. I don't need to send them another piece of mail to remind them. And the fact that Donald Trump has led his party to not vote early and to only vote on election day makes it much less efficient for them. And that is the reason why you see the Susie Wiles of the world just begging and pleading. You can just tell they are like dying inside. Donald Trump, stop attacking early voting, because it's literally costing them money every time he says that.
Yeah. Well, we will, of course, stay on this Mississippi lawsuit because, as I mentioned at the top, this has the potential to be a cataclysmic October surprise one way or the other. So we'll, of course, stay on top of it. For those watching right now, again, to support the invaluable work that Marc and his team are doing in the courts, please sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.